Jassis edwardsi, the red rock lobster, spiny rock lobster, or crayfish as they are more commonly referred to, are found throughout the coastal waters of southern Australia and New Zealand. They are probably one of the most prized and valuable catch for any spearo. All spearos have someone, be it friend or family, with a high demand for fresh crayfish. Considered a delicacy around the world, they are harvested commercially and sold at a premium price. Crayfish vary in color from reddish, yellow in shallow water, to purple and creamy yellow in deeper offshore waters. The easiest method to distinguish males from females is by looking at the fifth walking leg, counting from front to back. In females, the fifth legs have claws which are used to tend to the eggs under her tail during the spawning season. Males do not have this claw. Their fifth walking leg ends as a single point. Females also have 2 rows of swimmerets or pleopods on their abdomen, tails to hold their eggs, while males have a single row of swimmerets. Males also tend to have 2 larger front legs, whereas the females are much smaller. Females should not be taken when they are carrying external eggs which are carried between the swimmerets on the underside of the tail. This is referred to as a female crayfish that is in berry, pregnant. If females are pregnant, they will normally sit in a cave with their tails folded underneath them. To identify a crayfish in berry, look under the tail. Eggs are clearly distinguished as bright red bunches that look like moss or small grapes. These crayfish must be put back into their holes. Crayfish may also not be taken if they are molting or shedding their shells, which occurs during the growing stages, 2 to 3 times a year. Crayfish normally range in size from around 1 to -3 kilograms, with a 3+ kilogram cray considered old. There are different minimum legal size requirements for male and female capture. This is taken as the tail width measurement from the primary spine on the second segment. Males must measure a minimum 54 mm in width and females must measure 60 mm width. Crayfish are mostly found around rocky reef areas where they hide in and amongst the cracks and crevices in the rocks and frequently underneath kelp, which provides food and shelter. Crayfish are nocturnal creatures and can often be seen walking around on the seabed at night, scavenging for anything from small fish to crabs and other crustaceans. Although normally found in shallower waters around the 5 meters mark, they have also been caught by commercial vessels in excess of 140 meters. They inhabit rocky structures and can be found individually, in pairs or in groups. Once one crayfish has been located, there will normally be others close by, possibly in the same hole or crevice. The adult crayfish will sit at the back of the cave with the smaller crayfish at the front, and it's not uncommon for the adult crayfish to push the smaller ones forward when under attack. Crayfish can also live in the same cave or crevice alongside other creatures such as moray eels. It is believed that it takes around 8 years for an adult crayfish to reach the size at which it may be legally captured. Heavy crayfish around the 3+ kilogram mark are considered very old crayfish. Crayfish larvae pass through an intricate process of multiple stages of development and constant molting to accommodate new developments. And it takes approximately a year to reach the adult form with a solid carapace. Crayfish are a delicacy, by far one of the most expensive forms of seafood available, enjoyed by many and admired by most connoisseurs. They have clean white flesh and a strong gamey taste, and, when prepared properly, are succulent and full of flavor. Overcooking can result in dry, tough and tasteless flesh. The best way to prepare it is by boiling, steaming or on the barbecue. Finding crayfish can be somewhat of a challenge for newer divers. Freediving for crays involves dedicating time and effort, diving up and down, looking under rocks and in cracks and crevices at all different levels, often below the kelp. In order to catch them, we need to spend as much time as we can underwater at their level. It takes patience, and often newer spearos tend to be disheartened and give up too quickly. Eventually you learn to tell which rock structures are likely looking candidates for holding crayfish. Normally big rocks with some or all of the elements, ledges, deep cracks, crevices and gutters, with kelp above them. The hardest part is first finding them. Once located, there are normally more crayfish close by in surrounding rock formations. Where there are crayfish, there are crayfish. If you do discover a rocky area that holds a few crayfish, search the surrounding areas thoroughly and you'll be surprised how many. As soon as you have hold of the horns, the crayfish will flap its tail and try to retreat, so it's important that you have a strong hold. As soon as you have pulled it from the hole, grab hold of the tail with your other hand to avoid it flapping away. Capturing a crayfish by the horns is the most common way to grab them. although there are two other ways that you can use. If the crayfish is out towards the opening of a ledge and not wedged in between the rocks, you can thrust your hand underneath the cray's belly. This will make the crayfish latch onto your hand. Not a comfortable sensation, but I have seen it work. The second method is to grab the cray on top of its carapace. This is particularly effective on aerial assaults or for crayfish hanging upside down. With this method you can push the cray downward against the rock, pinning it, and then grabbing hold from there. You will have to assess which is the best method to use depending on the position of the crayfish. Some of the more aggressive crayfish might put up a fight by holding onto the rock with their legs as you try to pull him out. In this case it's best to wiggle them vigorously from side to side, which disorientates them and causes them to let go. Alternatively, you can push them backwards and forwards, which accomplishes the same thing. Remember, it's important to be firm and decisive when catching crayfish, and it's not uncommon to pull out a crayfish missing a few legs after a battle, especially with the bigger boys. For this reason, it is very important to check if the crayfish is in berry before you attempt to pull him out. If you pull out a female crayfish that is in berry, and break off a few of her legs, she is more likely to die. That's why inspection dives are key. There's no rush. Also, if a crayfish feels soft, put it back in the hole where you found it. Crayfish hunting does have a few hurdles to get over, but once you have made all the classic mistakes like being too gentle, or touching their antennae, you will learn how to approach them and snatch them like a pro. A few tools do come in handy when hunting crayfish. And, as always, it comes down to personal preference. The most common storage device used for crayfish is the catch bag, normally used by scuba divers. It can be worn around the waist, however. This adds a lot of drag and weight to the diver. And if connected and towed behind a float, creates a lot of unnecessary drag in the water. For this reason it is not really a feasible option for freedivers, spearos. Most spearos will use cray snares connected to their floats. These are made of monofilament wire and crimps, which make up 6 lassos. When you have captured the crayfish and returned to the surface, you tighten the lasso around the crayfish under its legs and across its segmented tail. This way it cannot swim off, no matter how hard it flaps. The other option is to tie the crayfish onto your float line by doing the same thing, lassoing your float line around their tails. Cray snares are more trusted, however, and an inexpensive security to have. The worst thing is getting back to the boat and finding out that your crays have come loose and swum off, especially after all the effort. Crayfish snares usually retail for around $25, which includes 6 loops for 6 crayfish. Some spearos swear by them and others are not so convinced. I have seen the best of both worlds. A good diving mate of mine always seems to pull out crays from darker rocks. This is because with a dive torch you can shine under the ledges and into the caves, illuminating any crayfish and any possible escape routes. The dive torch also temporarily blinds the cray, allowing you to snatch it quite easily. An excellent alternative is a small globe or LED torch that can be mounted to your mask strap, leaving both hands free for the job of catching the cray or spearing fish. Saying that, I know other divers who catch just as many crays without the use of a torch. It's a personal preference, I guess, and they sure do come in handy when it's too dark to see the back of the cave. Makes me wonder how many crayfish I've missed by not having a torch to thoroughly inspect some holes. Probably the most vital piece of equipment when crayfish diving is a good pair of dive gloves. Softer, shooting gloves will get shredded and torn in a very short time. You need to have some good Kevlar or robust rubber diving gloves, even a dedicated pair. The crayfish's spiny horns and body are renowned for ripping and tearing any and all diving gloves, and you'll find you fly through a few pairs of gloves in a good diving season. Solid and thick diving gloves do, however, give you that added confidence for handling and striking the crayfish in tight and awkward holes, and you're less likely to come away with. Crayfishing is a thrilling activity that can be enjoyed by the whole family. Crayfish, also spelled crayfish, and is known scientifically as Panularis cygnus, is a part of the spiny lobster family. This species is prominent over the west coast of Australia. Freshly caught crayfish in container. Over the years, crayfishing has become exceptionally valuable in the entire country, composing 20% value in the fishing industry. In Western Australia, it is considered the most important fishery with a probable value of $400 million. In this blog post, you will learn more about crayfish, how and where to catch, and some lovely recipes to enjoy its meat. Crayfish is often confused with lobster. In reality, these two species are not entirely different. The main distinction is that crayfish lives in freshwater while lobster thrives in saltwater. Western Australia has the western rock lobster, which the locals often call crays, which is not the correct term at all. However, the name has been around since time immemorial, so it is virtually impossible to change it. Crayfish are often referred to as rock lobster all over the country. A group with freshly caught crayfish in Wa, about 25,000 people are catching around 400,000 crayfish every year. It just shows how big this activity is, especially for recreational purposes. Recreational fishing typically takes place between Augusta and Northwest Capes inshore coastal waters. According to the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, cray fishing is permitted all year round. However, there are some rules and regulations to observe, which we will talk about later in this blog. Rock lobster or crayfish have strong, tough shells. However, these shells can easily be damaged. If you break their antennae or leg off upon catching them, you lower their chance of surviving in the wild. It is best to try for crustaceans that you're sure will be according to the rules. If you catch one that is not legal, make sure that you put it back where it came from. Australia is where you will find a wide variety of crayfish. As mentioned, western rock lobster is mostly found in Wa, making it easy to distinguish the species from others. If there is one type of crayfish that is usually thought to be western rock lobster, it would be the southern rock lobster. Here are some unique characteristics of the two. Western rock lobster has a distinct look because of its two prominent horns growing on the forehead. These horns extend beyond the front of the head. This rock lobster's body can be red or brown, and the shape is similar to that of a lobster. After shedding the exoskeleton, this lobster will look very pale, which is why it's called a white. Most people catch western rock lobster at less than 2 kilograms, but it can reach 5 kilograms. This species has a white dot on the lateral or outside edge of the tail segment. Scientifically known as Jassus edwardsi, southern rock lobster is also called the red rock lobster or spiny rock lobster. It is usually found in southern Australian waters, as well as the Chatham Islands in New Zealand. It can exceed 8 kilograms when living in underfished sites. If the lobster you caught has a single spine that runs from between the eyes to the center of the body, it is a southern rock lobster. Apart from the two mentioned species above, Australia has over 100 more. Other known types are the Tasmanian giant freshwater crayfish found in northern Tasmania rivers, the Murray crayfish, found mostly in the Murray-Darling Basin, Marron in Wa, where one of its two species currently tagged as endangered. The common yabby, red claw crayfish, and western yabby are also quite popular. Before you try catching crayfish, you must obtain a license first, whether you are fishing recreationally or commercially. Having a license for recreational fishing does not entitle you to sell or use the crustacean. You should never get anything in return, including a benefit or reward from barter and exchange. With the license, however, you are allowed to catch 8 rock lobster daily. You cannot acquire more than 4 tropical rock lobster species, namely the ornate and painted, green, rock lobsters. If you're fishing on a boat with other people, you are allowed to take up to 24 lobsters. Bear in mind that this limit only applies if there are at least 3 license holders on the boat with you. Here are other rules that you must adhere to when fishing for crayfish in Western Australia. Minimum legal size. Upon catching western rock lobster, you should ensure it measures at least 76 millimeters. The same requirement applies to tropical rock lobster. For southern rock lobster, it should be at least 98.5. You can catch crays using a loop, snare, or by hand. It's a great challenge indeed, and many fishers have developed their skills in chasing after crayfish with a single breath of air. There are a few ways that will help you catch crays while diving, but the most important is to wear a comfortable wetsuit with a hood. Have a black silicone mask, gloves, neoprene socks, and closed heel fins. Your weight belt should bear the correct weight so that you can be positively buoyant when on the surface. At the same time, it should let you glide to the bottom. You need to know the habits and movements of crays, which depend on the season. The best time is typically at the start of the season, since they are easy to find in the shallow waters near the Rottnest, Karnak, and Garden Islands. Spot them in low limestone ledges, usually off the shores. If you're fishing in the middle of December, be prepared to dive into deeper water. Rotto is the most suitable place until the end of the year. If you want them close to the shore, pick around late February to early March. Timber, which makes cray pots heavy and difficult to move or roll, but is expensive and may not be fit for small boats. Plastic, which is inexpensive and easy to set up, but is light and unsuitable for rough waters. Metal, which allows for easy storage but often requires extra ballast because of its lightness. Whichever pot material you select, it should not move. It's why heavy pots, particularly timber, is best for catching crays. You will need to rig your pot using specific objects, including floats, ballast, and a weight attached to a rope, 11mm pot line. For your bait, you're allowed to use oily baits, blue mackerel, and tuna heads. Use only fresh bait. If you decide to keep your catch, ensure that you clip at least the bottom half of the central flap of the tail fan. Alternatively, you can punch a 10mm diameter hole in the center of the tail fan. Do the clipping or hole punching within 5 minutes of taking the lobster to your boat or land. That way, fisheries compliance officers can distinguish it as a recreationally caught lobster. It means you're not allowed to sell it. Rock lobster from Wa is renowned for their beautifully textured white flesh, which is so flavorful. Once caught, it is best to cook and consume them as quickly as possible. If you plan to eat it after a few days or months, you will need to care for it, which is not exactly easy to do. The crays typically survive for hours after catching. Make sure you have adequate storage ready and never store it with a key and squid. Crayfish with your favorite homemade seafood sauce, consisting of cream, Worcestershire sauce, lemon, and tomato sauce, is just one of the popular ways to consume it. Keep it simple because crayfish has a delicate flavor, easily overshadowed by excessive garnishes. South American-style crayfish is considered fancy. It's flamed with brandy, lit with brandy cream sauce with chili and lime juice. A crayfish sandwich between pieces of fluffy white bread, seafood cocktail sauce, and iceberg lettuce is another way to enjoy your catch. For a simpler dish, a smoky barbecued rock lobster is a surefire treat. And this barbecue method is usually done in the oven. Cut the crayfish in the middle, place it on the baking dish, and chuck the barbecue butter sauce on top. This sauce consists of butter, cayenne pepper, and Worcestershire sauce. Add some lemon zest and 10 or more cloves of minced garlic. Cook it in the oven for about 20 to 22 minutes. Then, roll up your sleeves and enjoy that delicate, juicy
professional GoPro there.